Okay. Hey, we're back. It's the Future Proof podcast team. August 5th. It's again Monday. We switched up our recording days. It's now Monday, which I'm actually, for what it's worth, I'm enjoying doing on Monday because by the time Friday comes around, I wanted the weekend to sort of brush up on what we're going to cover on Monday. So I'm really happy. So, where do we find you, Francesca?
Hello. I firstly want to echo what Anthony said. It is very nice to be doing these recordings on a Monday afternoon. I think having the weekend to just think of a topic, like we decide these topics beforehand, and then just having the weekend to sit and think about it in a less stressful zone than maybe the work week makes for a nice way to round out the afternoons on Mondays. And I am in the Bay Area today. Yeah.
I know. What about you, Shane?
Where I
You're
always am. I'm
Yeah.
in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Good
It's
job.
getting
All
hot.
right. It's hot. Yeah. I have to say it's I know, Francesca, you were down here in Los Angeles, but it was quite a little bit hotter than maybe the Bay Area. But it's getting hotter today.
Yeah. I'm used to sort of like big temperature drops in between very small spaces, and so going down to Stanford where it is as hot or sometimes hotter than Los Angeles, and then going back to the city in San Francisco where it just drops like
Yeah.
10 degrees after a 40-minute drive. But it was very refreshing to be back in a cooler temperature
I
today.
bet. I'll bet. Well, I think we're gonna jump into this podcast. I think you had the as you do, the smart idea and the insightful idea it'd be like, hey, let's get our listeners and the people that are listening to the podcast to know more about us. Kind of almost like rewind and give a little background on who we are and why we're doing this and what we're up to. And I thought that was a great idea. So I think I'm going to hand it over to you. You ask questions and we just chime in and make this conversation flow.
Yeah, thanks. So as Anthony said, today is going to be a little bit different from our previous recordings, where typically we pick a topic that is very relevant to AI news or maybe some technology or some sort of thought thought-provoking question, and we run with it. But today's topic, which is very much just about who we are and what co-AI is, and sort of maybe taking a step back and looking at the concept of AI literacy, AI fluency, AI mastery as a whole. It was really inspired by this reflective moment where I was just genuinely curious to know how both of you ended up here, because I know my story of how I ended up here, and I feel like all of our stories are really different. And it felt like a really good opportunity to share that with everyone else who has been with us on this journey, maybe since the very first episode. I joined on episode 4, and now we're on episode, I don't know, double digits.
Yeah, it's like
or almost. Yeah.
Third, fourth. I'm the one that messed up the numbering of the episodes, but I think we're like right up around 14. But we're getting better at numbering those.
Yeah, and so it was really maybe born out of a selfish curiosity of wanting to know what brings you here, and maybe that's where we can actually start today before even getting into what co-AI is, what
Sure.
opportunities there are in sort of developing an AI literacy and tools out there that you like and all of that kind of stuff. Maybe just giving our listeners the story of how you got to where you are now. You can choose from where you begin if you'd like, but I'm personally very curious what your journey is and how you feel like all the things that you've done prior to co-AI have led you to this current moment of, just a lot of developments in artificial intelligence, and why you have picked
Sure.
to, try to tackle that very, very important problem.
Yeah, Shane, you want to flip a coin? You want to go first? You want me to go first? You pick.
Well, you go ahead.
but you always
You
say
got
like,
you got such a great story. Let's hook them while we have them, and then I'll
okay,
go after you.
okay. So age before beauty. Okay. Um, yeah. So I mean, I'm older than both of you, and so I kind of been around the software development world, and being a venture back founder multiple times. So I would say, I started falling in love with AI early before I was even like, knew how to write software. Like it was always in sort of like in my world, but probably not in like a real sense. But it was always inspiring me. And honestly, when I wrote my first sort of programs when I was just out of high school or in high school actually, my 10th grade class, I was just immediately the dopamine dropped. Like I was like, wow, I just wrote this thing and it did this thing, and I just felt like a sense of accomplishment and actually like immediately like I know how to do something, right? And it was like, and it was private. It wasn't like everyone was watching me. So I kind of fell in love with computing early on and sort of never left. And so like I said, I'm older than you guys, so we had to build our own computers. Literally we had to build our own 286 PCs, and before that we had Apple IIes and stuff. But I've been hooked with computing and making software work as well as making hardware work. But I think what zoomed me up to AI was in I had a company called Buzz Media, and we were backed by Sutter Hill and NEA and Redpoint, and we were building a very large social network. Actually, we were calling this social media before social networking, and we had to really write these massive recommendation systems. And so inherently, they weren't using neural networks to kind of do that, but they were using we were using something that was just called a language model. Like we do like sentiment, we do all these sorts of things,
Yeah.
and um, but you could never, it was not pop culture. It wasn't even that exciting. It was just like, okay, just crank this out. And, but it was always interesting. And we like, I think we hired some really interesting engineers that took it very seriously. And we went to a lot of conferences and studied how things are looked up. Like it was like retrieval conferences, you know what I mean? That were like in
Right.
London. It was
Yeah.
quite interesting. Um, but it was literally a necessity. Like you had to write recommenders, like you had to write these things, and you had to understand how your algorithms worked, and you had to figure out what was sticky. And so I kind of grew up in the 2000s, like really spending a lot of time figuring out how to make um, products sticky. That never really left me. I went on to where I met Shane. I went on to go into something that was a little closer to game tech, and game tech is really driven by a lot of state machines and AI systems. Sometimes in the game world, they refer to AI and state machines like almost like at the same time. So I have to ask, like, is that AI or is that a state machine? But nevertheless, like you try to do things um, in procedural fashions. And so again, kind of just always around there. It was never pop culture. I did notice that GPT-2, like I was early on that, like I was at the playground. It wasn't like, this is how crazy how fast this industry on the pop culture side of Gen AI has happened. Is like it was very interesting, but it wasn't really new to me. Like I didn't read the paper that drove it. Like I was just like, okay, cool, selecting the next word. Or it's like he was like, oh, it's guessing a sentence. It wasn't even that great. And I was like, but it was still inspiring. But I didn't honestly didn't take it that seriously, right? Like
Right.
it was it was there, but it was again, I was shadowed by his day-to-day work, and it was really when Shane and I looked at was it ChatGPT 3? Shane, was it? I forgot when we
It was when
really.
the first incarnations of GPT were coming out. Um, I mean, our initial instinct was we have to build on top of this.
Yeah, so we started using it on the project. We started using this. Well, actually, I think it was like in 2021. I started using, or it was either 21 going to 22 or 22 going to 23. 22 going to 23. I set up a stable diffusion node in my house for like over Christmas break, and I was just generating using transformers, and I was like just like mind-boggling impressed. I was like, something's changed, and
Right.
I had suddenly realized that I wasn't paying attention to this enough. And as I spent the next Christmas break like looking at the transformers and like doing some basic training and stuff like that, I was like, this is it. this is what the internet was to me in the 90s. And I thought it was really profound. And basically, it just made me look backwards at all the stuff I was been doing in computing at like sort of internet scale, and realizing like, wow, the stuff that we had teams doing can be done by maybe just one person. So I actually saw
Do
the
you
shift.
have like examples of what you mean by stuff that teams were doing? Like,
Well, like,
that
like,
like was there like a really light bulb
Well,
example
remember,
that
Anthony,
stood
we
out
were
to you?
talking about how can we potentially use some of this new tech to accelerate our existing pipelines, right? Like
yeah, I
we
mean,
had to manage a lot of different, 3D assets, for example. We had to do a
yeah,
ton of art. There's a lot of like pre-production and concept work that you've got to do. So those were some
those were
specific
light
areas
bulbs.
that we,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Those
those
were
were light bulbs.
cool.
Like I would say,
Yeah.
like, those were light bulbs. But it made the light. It was interesting because like it made me look backward, not necessarily forward. Totally, I was like, wow, this is like this is readily available. Like it wasn't that hard to set up and use and
Yeah.
operate. And so the light bulb along the way was like a team of like many engineers, like maybe greater than 3, less than 6, would spend a lot more time trying to figure out how to generate an image or generate a text string or analyze text in a way and then do sentiment. It was like a larger team, and it took real work. Like there was a lot more stuff that you had to do to kind of get there. And now I'm like, wow, this is just like running. And I just started doing more and more research. And Shane is right. Like we started putting it into like what we'd call like a production pipeline, where we were like, hey, let's just use all the stable diffusion tooling to like create stuff for us that would actually go from idea to like something we could sell to somebody in 22. And during that 22 to 23, Shane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we just were heads down on that. And how I got here, I was like, this is going to be such a big shift in the way that people work. And I maybe instinctually knew that this was going to be something that is going to it's like how personal computing gave everyone the ability to do something like word processing on their desktop or Photoshop. Like it just changed the way everyone operated when Photoshop and word, desktop publishing came. That we were there right now, and we just needed to do something to participate in it in a big way. So that's how I kind of got here. But I spent the 90s and the 2000s building classic internet software, both B2B and B2C, and went through like 2 big venture rounds. Had an opportunity to work in Silicon Valley with a very, very cool company called Iron Core Systems, which is doing internet security. So I played both on like B2B and B2C, and have learned a lot, and love everything I've made, and love the people that I work with. And I think this industry is a great industry. I think that we need more people to come to it with a way that it's going to shape it in the positive. Shane always makes me mention, because I always forget, that in the 90s...
I make him mention a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He tries to be humble, but I'm here to not...
Yeah, I was going to say, now is not the time.
Yeah, so
for our listeners.
Yeah, totally. Not to like forget, but it's like in the 90s, I'm my early co-founder at a company that never really got off the ground. We were building early websites for people in '94 in San Francisco, when I was just in San Francisco State, and his name was Craig Newmark. And as a side thing, we sort of created Craigslist, because we actually found that there wasn't a really good listserv. I was on this infamous bulletin board called The Well. And I was on that for quite a long time. I was a member of all these IRCs and Well, and that's where I met Craig, and we decided to create our own listserv. And we didn't know what to name it, so I told Craig, "Hey, just name it Craigslist, and let's get back to work." And our work back then was like really working on DNS bind, which was like the way to handle domain name systems, and early HTTP. This was before Apache. So I kind of got my roots building early internet systems, and never look back. I think we should be grateful to all those people that worked on this stuff. We were writing on the backs of them, and still today.
Yeah. To me, hearing your story gives a lot of really helpful context to explain where you come from when we have these discussions about AI. And I would say that all of us come with sort of different contexts. Mine, I would argue is more on the research and education side and like even communication side. And when I think of the discussions we've had in previous podcasts and in meetings and all of that, it's like you're really coming to this field from the side of like a builder and productization,
Yeah.
which we have talked about at length. We've had like a podcast episode that's almost been exclusively dedicated to how important it is to just develop not only good tech but good products. And so hearing your story and just all like these decades of experience just building and like building products like really gives important context to where
I appreciate that.
you're
And
coming
sometimes I'm so in the now sometimes that I forget about the past in a sense, but I appreciate the opportunity to share about that. Before we shift over to Shane, I
Yeah.
feel like one of your questions was like, well, how did you get here, or like this? And I would say that like also one of the most fundamental things that computing for people that weren't around, like there was something called freeware before it was called open source, right? And freeware was like just free software. And there were a lot of very influential people that like inspired me about that. And if it wasn't for the fact that you could download software and look at like how that was made, like you wouldn't know how to make it. And so there was this, at least I saw, and I could be wrong and other people could debate me, but I saw that there was like this track of people that did computer science. And then there was a track of people that just hack stuff. And I was not a computer science person. I was a hacker, right? And so I just would like download software and just hack it and get it together and working. And a lot of internet systems in the early days, like even though if you had the computer scientists coming out of like Berkeley and Stanford, stuff like that, the stuff that was being made was so made in real time that like you needed to be really agile and just like hacking it rather than sort of like leaning back and like doing it. So it was like really profound, but that's kind of happening right now because there are hackers in the AI space that don't know how, like could read the paper, but might not understand it totally, but they're able to actually use it. And that's what I call like right now, like we're in this like pop culture of AI. Like you can be a moderately successful programmer and just get so far today. And that started to me in the 90s. Like other people that were a lot older than me that were just like giving away software and helping me out. And that was all done on IRC. Back in the day, we didn't have IRC, we didn't have Slack, but we had IRC and we had listservs. And that culture really drove my adoption into computing. And if it wasn't there, I don't think we'd have the same world we have today. And I think that'd be a great discussion with other folks that were there and some new folks. But I think there's a parallel between the PC computing revolution and the internet and AI. There's some real similarities, and I think that the shift. We just thought, Shane and I just thought the shift here is so profound that we have to start helping people. And I've been working with Shane for a while, and he's just an amazing co-founder, and he's given me so much opportunity to work and do my stuff, and I hope I've done that for him.
Totally neutral. I have a follow-up question though for you, Anthony. I mean,
sure.
Do you think that your background, really just having to figure things out as you've gone along, has informed how you approach what we're doing now, and very specifically with non-technical people in mind, right? And I ask that because you and I have done something like 250 user interviews between the time that we first came up with the idea for CoAI and now. And one of the most common sentiments that we heard expressed was that people were just totally confused and baffled with how to even approach a lot of these tools. I mean, they too, are in this position where they're just trying to figure out how to hack stuff together, right? So I'm like, how does that approach, or how does it affect your approach to, what we're doing and how we communicate to people what we're doing? Because the big barrier, I think, for a lot of people is that even though these tools are really popular, and there are a ton of these tools out there, there is a learning curve. And a lot of times the earliest tools are built by teams of engineers that, they're not necessarily marketers. They're not thinking about all the ways to, finesse the language on the site. The MBAs haven't gotten there. So it's really left up to you as the user to figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer that question, then we'll get to your background because you kind of You got a great position here for everybody. I think that I think there's like hacker. You could switch the word hacker with just someone who's super curious. That's just like super curious,
Yeah.
right?
And I think, hacker, I would say, before you continue your train of thought, is like, portrayed in popular media as sort of maybe this like secret, I don't know, hooded person in
Yeah,
like some remote room and, maybe with some nefarious like intentions, etc. But, in the computing world, when you think of like hackathons being like really part of the subculture of computing, it's about that curiosity and it's about that speed of getting things done quickly and getting something to work
work.
within a really short period of time and kind of getting the innovation through that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, there is a subculture where hacker and hacking is sort of you know required. You know what I mean? And I think super curious people. I think that to your question, I think that like this in today's AI world, I feel like the super curious are going to be sort of they're going to already win in a way, right? Because they're unafraid, and this will come to a question that you'll have later, Francesca. Like almost the less you know, the better. Like literally know nothing. Like enter into this area with like no knowledge, no preconceived idea, just like a young mind, just a young mind. Oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that, right? So hacking sort of allows that opportunity, and the hackathon is a place where it says, "Hey, you're really bright, you're bright folks. Here's a time box. Make something, right? It gives you the time to like allow yourself to be curious." And so, to your question, Shane, I think it's like a really interesting time for the people that have the inclination and lack fear and have maximum curiosity. They're gonna actually, and you've seen it on Twitter. I've seen people have gone from like, I don't know how to code, and they're making applications. And I'm just like, and it's great. They're gonna inherit the world sort of in the future, right? Whereas people that are immediately perplexed or don't have the time or opportunity or the permission. Again, the internet was permissionless. AI right now is permissionless as well. It's like they don't have that time. They're gonna get left behind. And kind of jumping the gun, Koya is about sort of like what I was saying earlier, like the listers, the IRCs, people like Dave Weiner and folks like that. Where early on we're writing about just do stuff on the internet. We're trying to do that same thing for another class of people. Like if you're super curious, we'd like to talk to you, and so we inspire other people. It's the people that are just behind super curious that actually need to get this. And they need to get it while they're young, and they need to get it while they're old. Because I think with the software, the way the software is working right now, is actually going to it's going to super favor those people. And those people will have like far better outcomes in workplaces or on their personal endeavors. So I don't know if that answers your question, Shane, but let's hear about you too.
Yeah.
Where do you want me to start, Francesca?
I think you can choose like where the start of your story is. I mean, Anthony went back to basically the first program he ever wrote and that feeling, and I can relate to that for sure from when I wrote my first bit of code. But my curiosity really is just where you're coming from and how that has brought you to where you are now. How has that brought you to co-AI, and if there were any specific things or moments where there was that light bulb of this is what I need to be doing now.
Well, I mean, most immediately, Anthony mentioned we've been working together for a while. It's been, I think it might be 7 years to the month, actually, this month. So It's been a while. It's kind of crazy to think the time has gone by that fast.
Yes.
But we worked at another company quite closely on several different projects, and we were just really good partners, and we had very complementary, but very, very complementary skill sets, I would say. I was never trained as an engineer. I know Anthony's just told us he was very much a self-taught, programmer, hacker. But I never really even had that, in my career, because I'd started off in the military. Actually, I was in the Army for 5 years, and I had known really from a young age that I wanted to start a company. I didn't know what that was going to be. I was not the best high school student, which is part of the reason I even went into the military in the first place. Um, it was really for me just an opportunity to get some adventure, really get some discipline, I think, more than anything, and to give myself a second chance, I'd say. I remember having this internal dialogue when I was in, like, don't mess this one up, right? This may be the last chance you ever get. And it really just kind of inspired in me this new drive that I had maybe I think with sports, prior to that, but never really in an academic, sense. Um, and then when I ended up getting out, I had this newfound confidence really in my abilities, because when I went into the military, it's like, okay, you're going to actually try and just see what happens. Like, see how far you can go if you actually apply yourself. And when I got out, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I had essentially zero real world experience or skills. And so I ended up going to Wall Street first, because at the time, Wall Street, it certainly wasn't what it is today. It was like much more, I think, in demand at the time. And it was a really great experience for me, because you really start to understand the levers of a business, what drives value. And it teaches you to be extremely efficient with your time. It also just forces you to really do a lot of things that, later on as an entrepreneur are extremely useful. Not just, things like, time management, but it's really just about how do I look at, even qualitative things about a business, and begin to quantify them. How do I understand the levers? How do I understand what's driving value? How do I do research in a way to where I'm going to surface things that I can actually act on? And it gets you really familiar with, specific industries to the extent you focus on them. And I spent most of my time covering the tech industry. So we were working with a lot of, big ad tech companies and, other digital media companies. And that really is what started to guide me towards technology in general. But I was never trained as a technologist. I didn't go to school and study computer science. But what that meant was all of the building that I was seeing and so enamored with made me want to understand it at a level a lot deeper than a spreadsheet. And so it really began me on a journey of really just teaching myself a lot of the technology. And when I first went to work with, Anthony, I started to take all kinds of classes on my own. I was learning about, Unreal Engine and Blender and taking tutorials, online. So it was really a journey of self-guided learning more than anything. But before I worked with Anthony's team, I was running my own digital media company, which we did for about, 4 years. And looking back, there were a lot of parallels between what we were doing then and what we're doing now with CoAI, because our intent at the time was to bring the boutique shopping experience online. Right. There were a lot of really great fashion brands, artists, all kinds of designers. You could only really find them in, boutique shops in like Brooklyn or Berlin or Munich or, Oakland. So a very fragmented market, which is exactly what we see today with CoAI. But we ran that company. Media was a huge part of the company. We published all kinds of content. And we did that for about 4 years before we finally sold the company. And I at the time I was convinced I'm never going to get another job again. I'm just going to keep starting, businesses, until I met Anthony and his team, and I saw the tech, and I was so mind blown at the stuff that I was seeing, that against, everything I had told myself for the years leading up to that, I signed on pretty much immediately. And I ended up working with them for, about 6 years. And that's really when I started getting really deep into that journey of self-guided learning. And I started taking all kinds of courses. I mean, I was taking, courses on, how to train a model, optimizing machine learning algorithms. And it was an enormous amount of work. And it made me wish that I had done it earlier. But it also proved to me, because at the time, a lot of people there's a big debate that still continues to this day. Like, does it make sense to learn how to code if the long-term trajectory of software development and AI means that it's all going to be automated. And, I was just so convinced that that was not true, that it still made sense to have at least some, basic level of technical skills. Plus, I was just curious as a creator. I wanted to understand.
And do you still maintain that point of view now,
Yeah,
as you
I
did
do.
back
I
then?
do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I still, part of my daily routine is often waking up and finding a course on some topic that I think is
Mhm.
interesting, even if I don't think that it's necessarily relevant to what we are doing. But most of the
Mhm.
time, it very much is. And I'll just take a course, and it may take months to finish. But I'm doing that with all kinds of different courses, everything from, like I said, training models to, diffusion models,
Right.
to just generative AI hacks and prompting techniques. And it's really been instrumental to what we do because,
Mhm.
a lot of times you get, quote unquote business people on the team and they really understand, the value drivers, business models. But I think if you don't understand to some extent how the tech is working under the hood, you are at a slight disadvantage.
Yeah.
And it's really informed, my approach to what we're doing quite a bit because, like I said, we've interviewed so many people before we started this company. And what we found is that, a lot of the early adopters in the AI industry, a lot of the what we call AI curious, they're already being super served by an enormous number of newsletters, tool directories,
Mhm.
folks on social media. But everyone else, which is like 99% of the world, aren't really being spoken to in a way that communicates to them what AI is, what it's capable of, in plain English, in a language they can understand.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that level of curiosity and you just think of the entire industry as a black box, then you're not going to really be able to put it to use in a way that really benefits you. And as someone who prior to the start of my career really thought technology as a whole was really a black box and had to invest an enormous amount of time into understanding it myself, I could really empathize and resonate with those folks who are, to a large extent, just kind of scared of the technology. It's a very, really big learning curve, right? Those are the people that I'm interested in reaching with Co-AI.
Yeah. And we'll get to a section in the podcast where we can talk specifically about what Co-AI is up to and sort of your mission for Co-AI, because this podcast is only one small piece of a much larger Co-AI ecosystem, and Shane and Anthony are very busy working on maybe too many things at once because there are just so many new ideas that sort of come out of, I know, our weekly check-ins, that it always feels like I'm personally discovering something new in Co-AI. And I really appreciated just hearing both of your backgrounds because it kind of just shows where you're coming from and sort of what you hope to communicate to other people. I would say that I come from maybe the flip side, as I alluded to earlier, in that I kind of fell in love with AI from very much a researcher's point of view. I studied computer science at Stanford almost by chance in a way. I think it was that I wasn't really that interested in programming until I took my first intro programming class pretty late, I would say at the start of sophomore year, where some people had already come into Stanford
Yeah.
having built their own programs and were very much advanced. And I took it because it was like a general engineering requirement at the time, and took that intro course and then had to take the part 2 of the intro course. And it was that part 2 where suddenly I would just be able to get it. It was almost like that feeling that you described, Anthony, of being able to see a problem and then see the steps that you needed to take to solve that problem, and then do all those steps basically in one sitting, and then having that success. And I think that was really striking to me. But I did not really like exams. I did not like problem sets. I was like not that kind of person at all. But I stuck it out because I had to declare a major, and at the time it felt like computer science was sort of the opportunity for me. And once I got to the more advanced classes where you were really given free reins to just explore a topic of your own choice and complete your own project, that's where I really fell in love with not only computer science, but specifically AI, because it was basically like doing a mini research project for every class. And I found that that was exactly where my skill set developed, and that felt really good, and it also allowed me to have that curiosity that both of you were talking about, where I could identify maybe a problem space that didn't have a solution, but there was some parallel solution out there for a different problem space, and I'd like take that take that algorithm or any implementation and modify it to apply it to that problem space. And so it was very much in this research box that I was operating. And it wasn't until after university, so I did my undergrad in computer science, I did a master's in symbolic systems, and I focused on natural language processing research, which at the time did not feel as important as it has clearly become today in sort of the understanding of
What year was
AI.
What year was that then? Like what?
It was in 2019 that I did it. And so, I remember all the classes like that I took in sort of understanding natural language processing. It was very much, the basics of sentiment analysis. That was the intro NLP class. We did spoken language processing, which I think was really interesting, and then became really interesting again a few years later when all that stuff with ChatGPT trying to adopt a voice and sort of the human aspects of voice in these LLMs. I did like a deep learning with natural language processing class, and at the time it was just what I was doing because I loved language, I loved communication, and I loved the idea of having language as data is what I would tell my parents when they asked me what exactly I was doing, and it'd be like, oh, it's like, imagine that language is your data point instead of numbers. And I did not think at the time it would be anywhere where it is today in terms of just how important having that foundation was, because it was not in my plan to go into industry, and particularly not in my plan to work for some company that is now developing these massive LLMs. But I guess we meet in the middle is what I'm trying to say. It's interesting to me that we as a trio have had this point of convergence where personally I came into it loving research, and then I went into education. I was teaching AI to high school students. I was developing curriculum, running programs. I created my own program, and it was never in my mind to think that much about productization in a way that, Anthony, you were from the get-go thinking about that sort of hacker mindset productization. And yet here we are, and we all find ourselves here because of basically what has happened in the last couple of years, which is just a very interesting journey to really bring the various people in AI, like people in product, people who had been like studying or following technology professionally in a non-technical role, and then someone who had been doing research and never thought about, productizing this research. Mm-hmm. And here we are. So I think that leads me to my next question, which is, what is Co-AI? What is the mission of Co-AI? And what are the different offerings that you're working on that you think our listeners really, really need to get in on today?
Good question.
You want to take that, Anthony, or you want me to?
You go for it, and I'll see if I can. If you have any holes in, I'll add. I doubt I will, but just go for it.
I'll answer it by giving you one really short story, which is related, I think, to your own journey, Francesca. I started becoming really interested in AI maybe about 10 years ago, but it was very theoretical, very philosophical, like reading all kinds of books about the future when we had something like artificial general intelligence, right? And I was much more curious from almost from like a neuroscience perspective. I've always just been fascinated by the subject of consciousness in general, right?
Same here.
And
I think it's so interesting.
so that really drove a lot of my initial interest. And in fact, I was really heavily considering doing a neuroscience PhD, about 10 years ago. Obviously, I didn't do that, right? But the reason I bring that up is because my own focus on AI now has become very, very practical, right? Like, how do you
Right.
actually put it to use? And that is really
Yeah.
why I think where we are today is very different than where we were, 5 years ago, right? These new tools, despite all of the FUD in the industry right now, all the media is essentially tearing down AI, especially Wall Street, which we can talk about. But if you spent as much time using the underlying tech, building with the underlying tech, using a lot of the tools as we have, you would know that it is truly different this time. And it is really, really impactful for people who know how to use it, right?
Yeah.
But the key question there is, do you know how to use it? And that is why we set up CoAI, right? So to answer your question is about what CoAI is and why we started it. It is a platform to help teach people very practical strategies to succeed in this new era, right? And that encompasses several different things, right? For one, it's an aggregation of all the activity that's happening in the industry, right? We publish all kinds of, daily news. We're publishing summaries of the latest research reports, but we're publishing those summaries in a way that, you as a non-technical person can understand what the research is about and why it's significant, right? Why is this breakthrough relevant to you as a marketer, right? Or someone who works in entertainment? How do we translate what is very dense technical knowledge into plain English that you can understand, right? We also do have a directory of, at this point, it's up to over 50,000 different tools.
Which is an absurd number. That
It
is,
is, yeah. And you won't
Yeah.
see that. You won't see them all on the website, and that is because we are getting extremely deep and accurate data on every single one of them. And the purpose of that is really there are a few purposes to doing that, right? So if you talk to people, just normal people, most people they've heard of ChatGPT. But even ones who would say that they're relatively experienced with it, one of the most common refrains we get is that they still don't know what quite to ask it, right? Or how
Mhm.
quite to interact with it. So you can pretty much safely assume, and we know we can because we've talked to countless folks, that if they feel that level of uncertainty and confusion with the tools everyone knows, then they really feel that way with the rest of what's in the market. So the directory for us is really an attempt at what we call solving the discovery problem. How can we enable people to find the tool for the job that they need to get done? Like Anthony,
Right.
our approach is very focused on this whole philosophy of jobs to be done. It doesn't matter to the end user whether it's AI. What matters to them is will this enable me to solve my job? And
Yeah.
what's happening in the industry right now is that pretty much every software solution, every problem that you may have as a professional is now being fundamentally rethought of using AI, right? And they may not appear like new tools to the average person or newcomers to the industry because they look like they do the exact same thing as a tool that previously existed, but under the hood they are run just very differently, much more efficiently in a lot of cases, and obviously a trend towards things like being conversational. But most people
Yeah.
just don't know that these tools exist.
And if I could
Yeah, go ahead.
just jump in there, I think about this a lot, but I'm thinking about it. Something you said about sort of AI in terms of just practical AI,
Mhm.
and that's really what the focus of CoAI is to sort of supply people with the knowledge of the practical AI out there to help them with their jobs to be done. I think it's important to note that because AI has really exploded in pop culture recently, I think the idea of Gen AI or generative AI has been conflated with AI as a whole. But I want to flag that, generative AI is just one part of this bigger thing called AI, which is, part of this other thing called AGI, which is the artificial general intelligence. And if you think that maybe something in the Gen AI workflow isn't necessarily right for you, so maybe you're not in need of something like ChatGPT writing job descriptions for you or writing emails for you or sifting through documents and giving you a summary. There is a whole other side of AI that also has thousands and thousands of tools that exist in terms of being able to analyze your data really effectively, to test your marketing campaigns, to maybe recognize different patterns in visual data that you have. I think the pop culture fiction, I know that's not a word, but you get what I'm saying,
Yeah,
of
totally.
sort of AI being Gen AI is in a way maybe isolating some folks from approaching AI where they think, oh, I don't need the ChatGPT chatbot interaction. But I want to remind all of our listeners, there is a whole other side of AI that if you are looking for just hardcore analysis of data, if you're looking for automation, smart automation, personalizing things for your customers, those tools exist as well. And I
Yeah.
bet Shane has tools off the top of his head if you gave him a problem space that he could point you to that aren't even these
Well, I want to.
chatbots.
There's another motivation behind what we're doing that's really important that I didn't mention. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The directory itself, I don't think is all that novel. I mean, there are countless directories that exist on the marketplace. There are several reasons why I think what we are going to release in the very near future really differentiate how we approach this notion of a directory. But one of our fundamental missions is to help the AI companies themselves, the teams behind the AI companies themselves, succeed. There's been a very there's been an enduring argument in the business world in general for years, which is just about the notion of power accumulating to a very small handful of companies. And I think there's justification. I'm not one to say we should break them up, right? I don't fall in that camp. I think for a variety of reasons we should have very big companies, especially when a significant amount of capital is required to deliver certain services at a low cost, for example. On the other hand, we don't want everything that we care about, all the services we care about, all the software we care about, the jobs that we need to get done, to be essentially gatekept by just a few big powerful tech companies, right? So it's really important for us at CoAI to ensure that there is a fair innovation ecosystem. And so a big part of solving this discovery problem is not just for the end users and helping people find whatever it is they're looking for to do their job, but to make sure that the teams and the builders behind those tools are actually getting discovered and that we're helping to accelerate their own journey to market. So that's a really big part of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add on that, I think that we definitely are entrepreneur, focused, meaning we want to see them more successful, and we know how hard it is to get the first 1,000 users. We also know that for people that are not accustomed to asking questions in a community, that's also difficult. So we're really trying to create that community connection between people that are all learning together. We may not be training them directly, but they might need a place to come for a question, learn something. We also want to connect them with the people that are making it, and specifically product teams, engineering teams, early in their development cycle, that they have an idea for a really clever advancement using AI, but it's a product that they really need those users. Where are they going to go? So we're really sort of we're not we're looking to help them, but we're like where the Twitter sort of AI tip of the spear folks are. They're like we're right after that. We're like we're like the early majority, not the late majority, and the innovators are really on Twitter. So there's a space for us in building a community where it feels like you are quickly you're adapting the language, you're meeting people, and you're learning about new tools and services that are arriving is really sort of the gateway. And then over time, we want to see them not just take a course that we may be offering, but multiply taking courses everywhere and then kind of coming back and working as just sharing what they're doing. So we really think community, and this is kind of going back to the early days of the internet. A lot of things that were driving the success of the early adoption of the internet and the open source and free software stuff was community. And as the internet has become sort of owned by big groups of people, it's harder and harder to make community outside of those groups. And we really want to sort of say, like, be 100% focused on 100% focused on the user and the entrepreneurs of these AI companies. I mean, we want to sort of like see them sort of coexist and grow. And that's kind of where co-AI is. It's really at the intersection of the maybe someone that's more advanced in business that needs to know about AI and they don't want to be a technologist, and the technologists that are making the software for all those groups of people, sort of like pushing them together and let them sort of like commingle and learn from each other, because the best software is always written when it's actually solving the real problem. And oftentimes as an engineer or a product person, you might be guessing at the solution, and the only way to really make it is like have a bunch of users use your software, and slowly evolve from there. And so that's Koya's really trying to do that. And we're not in San Francisco, we're not in the middle of the belly of the beast, so we have a little bit of a slower sort of approach to it, like rather than like hyping everything. And that's, I think you had mentioned in a question in our briefing that, like, about some of the language we use on the site, and we really are really slightly.
That was my next question.
We're slightly So we're targeting a different user segment that we think is what we call like the early majority and the late majority, and we think that there's the greatest, and the reason why I think why Koya's in that is that we think that group of people are in sort of two different. It's like a dumbbell of ages. I think a lot of those people are older, and there's a lot of people that are in college, and they're going to be sort of entering. They're in a situation where they're going to be having to like face significant AI development software that's going to be highly tuned for people that are practical with it coming out of college. Or you're in a domain expert and you're getting these new tools that are going to actually turbocharge you and your team. And if as the more you get that, you're actually going to be more successful at your current gig than worry about it. So we think those two audiences need really purpose-built communities to sort of bear hug them and help them.
Yeah, when I think of sort of the potential users of all the different things that you guys are up to, and I can also talk about what I like to get from Co-AI myself. Yeah. But if I talk about, potential users that I imagine would really benefit from the various offerings, first of all, like, people should just listen to our podcast because it's fun. It's always fun for us to record them, and it's a very casual outlet for us in a way that maybe some of the other content is very structured and very dense with information. These podcasts are kind of just nice to listen to on a drive, on a walk, if you want to hear some perspectives on your favorite AI topic of the week. Like, come listen to us here. I can imagine that the research reports are a really interesting offering, Shane, that you have these sort of bite-sized distillations of, complex research reports, complex technical reports in the space. And I can imagine a use case where someone maybe similar to the position you were in, a decade ago or something, is working in, the finance sector and needs to do some kind of analysis on the tech and has to have some deeper understanding of the tech itself. The research reports might be for them. I can imagine that a professional who has already, fleshed out a workflow that works for them and has the way they want to work, but wants to just do it better, or like offload some of that to some AI scheduling app. Or I know, Shane, you love using your note-taking app for meetings, and then I get the notes of the meeting that we have sent directly to my email. Maybe someone already has a workflow like that and just wants to know which note-taking app tool should I use. So they'll look at your directory. I've worked on some of the more like step-by-step recipe books, marketing being one of them. And I think that's very much for, as you said, Anthony, like if you're early in your career and you want to get started, but you don't know how, these like recipe books are great for that. And personally, what I like to receive is I get the newsletter every day. I've signed up for the CoAI newsletter and I get it every day. I read all the headlines. I love the different formats, the different nuggets. But every newsletter has led off with the line, no hype, no doom. And so that was the question that I wanted to ask you, Anthony, and you had mentioned that you are very much no hype, no doom. What does that mean? Why is it important to have that language with the CoAI daily newsletter? It's all over the website. What does it mean?
It stems from so, if you're learning about AI, you might actually be learning about it from teams that are sort of have to write about something in a very psyched way because they get clicks on it and then they get advertising dollars. So they, by definition, have to hype everything out. And they do that for a while, right? It's the media cycle. They do that for a while. They goose the like, hey, this is the best thing ever. We're gonna, AGI, blah 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 blah. And then and everyone's sort of like, wow. And then they'll shift it. They'll be like, and now it's bad, and then they kind of go into like the bad stories of it all, right? How everything's going to be bad, and that's the doom side. So they kind of do the hype, like, and I'm not going to name the publications, but there's many of them. They focus on the wrong things, but we felt like, hey, like, you can listen to the hype and the doom, but know that there are business models designed to do that, and you may not be actually getting a fair shake or an understanding of it. And we wanted to tell the entrepreneurs, hey, look, you got to pay attention to us because, like, we're not going to hype your product, and we're not going to doomsday it either. Like, we're going to give it a fair shake, and the team and what we're doing is like we really want this version of the AI community. There's been many of them, but this one, we want them to have a community where they can actually sort of have that sort of headline. Hey, we're not going to hype you. We're not going to doom you. We're not going to, and it's really important because when you're developing a new product, it's easy to get hyped and not live up to it. And so people are turned off, or people are just like, dunking on you and your product is really quite good, but you're just not ready. And so it's like, we want to be fair and we want to be reasonable and we want to be very practical. And I think that like getting out of that, and that's why we actually are trying to set up our product from day one to sort of allow that to happen. And that's why it's there. It may change over time. You know what I mean? Google had the do no evil, and I thought that was more of a precursor note because they've already saw all your data and they're like, wow, like it was like they knew they could do something evil, therefore they said, let's do no evil. Like, we're really trying to sort of say, look, hype and doom is not what you need right now. You need community, you need fairness, and you need as much accuracy as possible so that you can.
And I think practicality is what stood out from sort of Shane's summary of CoAI is that you can get a lot of news about AI companies, about even the latest tech. And it's not really that, it's fascinating for sure.
Yeah.
And it's something that you want to have that understanding of, but on a very practical level, sometimes you really just want to get a job done. You want to get a task done. And having this space where you can get that information without any of the hype or doom, I think is also really important.
Yeah, Anthony and I, we've talked about just how much we use and love YouTube for learning about what's happening in the AI industry, but just scroll through several YouTube channels that focus on AI and count the number of times you see shocking in the headlines. It's like every single time. It's like, well, come on. Let's like, I think our point is that it's not just unhelpful for users, right? But I think it's bad for the industry. All the hyping, because it's creating these very inflated expectations, way ahead of, a lot of the building. And then inevitably, a lot of products, not all of them, because there really truly are some groundbreaking products that have already been built and are being worked on. But then, they see the hype, then they get to a tool that really just lets them down. And then it just creates this perception that, the AI industry as a whole really has no substance behind it. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing, in the headlines now, right? Particularly this week.
Yeah. For me, it's also sort of going back to my earlier point of the conflation between Gen AI and AI that has really only been brought up recently because of, ChatGPT and Claude and, these massive LLMs just coming into pop culture. And so, these LLMs have really grown in popularity because of their Gen AI capabilities, because of the magic where you could really just ask this screen to do something and the output is there for you. But in a way, it always makes me think of what isn't being covered. That's also super important in the AI space, and probably not even that new to AI space. For example, machine learning algorithms have been used to help, with like detection and medical imaging, which is like not really well covered, but has a very significant impact in the medical field, right? And it's not Gen AI. It is like, these analytical AIs using these, machine learning algorithms to detect some kind of visual pattern in medical imaging. But that's like not getting caught in the sandstorm of hype and doom. And so that's always what I think about, like what isn't being captured when other things are being captured in these news cycles.
We agree. And like, I mean, there's just so much really going on and it is hard. And I think the things that are standing out, that are truly magically fun technology where you're just like, wow, that is for me. It's really, it's irresistible to talk about, but it's actually sometimes hard to talk about how, in the medical practice, how it's been helping us, as humans probably stay alive for quite a long time. Also the agricultural
the
space.
Environment. Exactly.
Especially in weather. I mean, that's like, back in there like years ago, there was this whole field called bioinfographics. It was like this study of like information and biology and weather. It's like, it's like we've been living in big data for a long time. And by the way, all the big companies had big teams to kind of crunch big data. They used to be called big data. Like they didn't, that term's gone, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't talk about big data anymore. But so there's just so much going on in this space, and it's
totally.
It's hard not to fall into the hype or the doom.
Right. I think so. I mean, if you think about the way that one story before I move on to the next question, because I wanted to ask you about the co-AI community, but one example of this that I think is particularly salient is Google. There is so much hype and doom surrounding Google because of their Gemini Pro release, all of that sort of controversy, etc. And then you completely forget about AlphaFold, which is
solving problems.
Is this just really groundbreaking use of AI for drug discovery that it has basically been the forefront of using AI in drug discovery that is, an Alphabet product that is really a testament to Google's ability to spin up AI research into a product or something useful for researchers out there with massive effects. And that is like nowhere near in the sandstorm, compared to Gemini. And so that's like an example that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example, right? Like you got AlphaFold that's like helping humanity find, drug discoveries, right? And
Yeah.
but I think that the reason why that's so far to reach is like the average person doesn't do drug discovery, right?
Right.
And so it's like, but many people have to write like a report for their boss, and it's like this thing. So it's like it just happens in different scales, and
Totally.
so
Like how many people realize the partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft?
yeah,
OpenAI and Apple when Apple AI comes out. But we could go on about
yeah,
this. So I'll pivot to a question that I
sure,
wanted to ask about the co-AI community because, working with you guys and working with the other members of the co-AI community, I don't know that it's apparent to the audience, unless you really go through our website and click through all the profiles on the About page. But there are a lot of young folks on the team.
Mhm.
And I get the sense that that was something that you did with a lot of purpose and you really thought about. And I wanted to ask why it was so important to you in sort of, at least developing the internal co-AI community, why it was so important to have so many young people, particularly undergrads, who are studying different fields at different universities and are very much in the early stages of their careers. Why was it so important to you to have these folks involved?
Yeah, well, it was a very deliberate decision on
Right.
our part. I mean, and some of Anthony and my very first conversations when co-AI was just an idea, um, was that we wanted to build it in the form of a community. And there were many reasons to that, but one of them is that I think the learning process, especially for something as complicated as AI, is almost inherently social, right? You're especially if you're out of school already, right? Like you have to figure out how to do things, right? Like Anthony can talk to this, coming from a career of just figuring stuff out.
Right.
Um, and that involves all kinds of consultation to blogs and YouTube videos, but it also involves a lot of people going to places like Reddit. If you're an engineer, Substack, right? The thing is, and this is really to Anthony's credit, um, there is no equivalent of a Substack for, the modern business worker. And the reason why that is, I think, irrelevant is because as our work as AI becomes more integrated into our daily workflows, I think in many ways, our workflows, people's workflows as business people may in fact resemble, that of an engineer more and more. Where you've got to figure out, hey, how do I use this new tech? How do I integrate it into my, company? How do I do it safely? Where do I go to get this data or whatever it is, right? And there really are very few, especially when we started the company, places where you can do that. And there was an active community there to help answer each other's questions. We didn't want all the answers coming from us as co-AI. So in
Yeah.
the beginning, we're like, well, who is building that community? Right. And the answer at the time was nobody, right? There were, I think, a lot of people attempting to, still are attempting to, I would say, but it's a very, disaggregated community, or ecosystem of a bunch of very small communities. And they may, one may be focused almost entirely on marketing, whereas another may be focused more on, machine learning or data analysis. And so our insight was really who is building really this big ecosystem where everyone can reach each other. And so that was one of the first reasons why, and I'll get to the current community members in a second, but that really informed everything having to do with who we wanted to reach out to, right? So we put out several calls to actions to see whether people would be interested in joining a community such as this. And
Right.
within about, I'd say, a month and a half, we had over 15,000 applications to join the community. And most of them were undergrads. A lot of them were grad students. So a lot of them, and they're all at different schools. And we interviewed a ton of them. Like, hey, why did you apply? Why do you want to join? And almost in every single case, they said, this is how I'm spending all my time anyway. I'm really fascinated with AI. I'm spending a lot of my time just reading the news, reading research reports, experimenting with
And
tools. A lot of them said they had their own spreadsheets of tools that they were
okay.
maintaining that were getting out of control because there's so many. And secondly, a lot of them said, I'm so interested in this, but I'm not really getting taught any of it at school.
And if I may ask, and if you can recall, what did the call that you put out say, out of curiosity?
There was a lot of
Like, what was it
emphasis
called
on
for?
the vision for the company.
Okay.
And even now, if you go to the website, admittedly, you are not going to see really any sort of community features. I mean, we're building out of the open. There's a lot of stuff to come.
Right.
But simply describing the mission of the company and what we were trying to achieve and what our values were, that alone ended up resulting in us getting a huge amount of interest. So we thought, okay, we're on the right track. Like we're tapping into some need that a lot of people want addressed and aren't having it addressed. And, that community has really helped accelerate us in so many different ways because people, the people in that small community that we have, they want to contribute, right? They want to contribute to teaching just as much as they, want to learn.
Mm.
And now, they help on all kinds of projects internally, from publishing content to our newsletter to, going out and, helping us enrich data, like you name it, like any function in the company that we care about, there is someone on the community in some capacity helping to accelerate it.
I have a sort of an additional sort of factor that the reason why we really wanted to kind of enlist a lot of young people was and it's a little meta, but we really wanted to build this company on the back of using AI tools. It's sort of like building a compiler for your software language. You know what I mean? You have to write the language and the compiler, right? So we really wanted to write like, hey, how do we build an AI community using all the AI tools as much as possible? And how do we enlist a lot of people that have the mindset of like, this is all brand new. Like you know what I mean? Like they weren't coming from hey they were coming from a place of like freshness and like and so we really sort of like said, hey, let's build this way. Let's enlist a lot of people that have not a lot of institutional bias to like making stuff. And so we can say stuff like we should do this or that, and it's like we can use this tool, and there was no pushback because there was like, no, the way we did it over here was blah blah blah. So we really wanted to sort of co-build with the community before we started letting people in the community that were already using sort of some of the stuff that we made. Like, so it's like we're building it with like a community of people. So we've got our language on our compiler now, and now we're releasing it to the public, and now we're going to get people saying, hey, the compiler doesn't work, or I don't understand the language, and then that community starts pop. So we're kind of building it as we go, but we really wanted to be inspired by people that were excited and inspired. And so we instantly found, not exclusively, but we instantly found that like the undergrads were there. And interestingly, I think Shannon mentioned that like they said they were spending time on it. I actually think that if you're an undergraduate and you're the curious type and we're selecting from some of the top schools in the world, they inherently already knew that this is coming, right? And as a result of sort of when you're dealing with kids, young people from Stanford, Harvard, and Cornell, they're already exceptional. They're already sort of aware and exceptional, and so it's really easy for them to sort of connect the dots maybe a lot earlier than a lot. So we kind of really selected from there because we wanted to see how they were thinking about it and so we know that we're going out, that we going broader to obviously more universities, but we're going to build that community there, and then we're going to go broader, and we just think it's a great way. But they're not doing email marketing. Their jobs to be done are like schoolwork. So some of the stuff that we're on, it's not like, hey, I'm like the piece that you're working on about email marketing. It's like they're not in my email marketers, but we think that like there's a way for them to like listen and contribute there that we might get a novel take on it. And we've also gotten them to actually tell us about stuff that we've never heard of, like just like the use of the
Yeah.
use of Pinterest and the use of TikTok in ways that we wouldn't have like picked up on if we were
Yeah.
selecting from a different cohort.
Yeah. Well, the Slack workspace is always very active
Yeah.
with people just chiming in. And I know, Shane, you said there's no community feature yet on the public facing website, but if the sort of internal community is a sample of what is to come, I'm sure that will be a very, very exciting feature in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
And,
so Slack, just to be clear for people who don't know any of this, our community, we really all of that activity is taking place in a Slack community of ours. And I would, the one thing I would add to the community aspect is that just from a product development standpoint, it's been so helpful because they are our first point of contact when we want feedback on a new
yeah.
feature, a new page, a new idea. We are constantly engaging that community to give us their reactions. Like, does this suck? Tell us if it sucks. Or do you like it? Or hey, take a look at these wireframes, or go through the site and experience it yourself. So it's allowing us to really constantly develop with the end user in mind, right?
Yep.
In a very low cost way, right? Because they're part of the community, they're invested in the product, they're not a customer, that may get scared off because we released something too early or didn't put enough thought into it or overbuilt it. So it's a really great group of folks.
Yeah, I was gonna say the next big segment of the community is like that working professional, Francesca, that may not have as much time as like in some cases some of these undergraduates, where the product needs to be a little bit more filled out and are running legs to sort of meet them with what they need.
Yeah.
Need to be more developed. But I think that's the future for us, is because every entrepreneur that's making a really killer new AI feature or product, they need to have that business community to be like, oh yeah, we work in medical, or we work in legal, or we work in sales, or we work in real estate, or we work in acquisition or procurement, and they need to get that community to test their software. And we're sort of actively building that community, but that's slightly further out, not too far out, but that's the way we're sort of building. And
that's a really good point that I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought up. What we talked a little bit about wanting to help accelerate the teams building these new AI products. And as Anthony said, a little earlier, getting that first, 100, 1,000 users is really tough. And that is another reason why we built, that's why we've really built with community as a core focus in terms of what we offer, because, they become an immediate testing ground for companies that come to work with us, and companies whose products you will definitely find in the directory.
And I would say that what I really like is maybe this longer term vision of eventually being the Stack Overflow-esque thing for a professional who really wants to, just find some tool or resource to help them get their job done. For those of you listening who have never encountered Stack Overflow was really, personally for me, a lifesaver in college. And even after that, when I was programming for various projects, you could ask it for just basically solutions to some bug in your code, and it would give you sourced from a community answers to your questions. And you could go as high level as like, oh, is there a library in Python that helps me, create visualizations from this kind of data? Or you could go as simple as like, please give me the line of code that will help flip my list or something like that. And yeah, you're right. There is no equivalent right now for the working professional who might want an answer to a question like, oh, what is a great all-in-one marketing tool versus like, please walk me through how to A/B test for this campaign. And hopefully we get there, because it sounds like for people who've never had the joy of using Stack Overflow and finding the perfect answer. Hopefully we can get there for you. So as we wrap off, I want to do sort of a like rapid fire question round of just, you know, really direct answers about AI and where you see it going, what's on your mind. The first question I have for both of you is, do you have a favorite tool that you're using at the moment, or a tool that you really want the listeners today to hear about?
It's a hard one because I think there's so many good ones that I use, and it really just depends on the task that I'm trying to get done. I mean, we've talked probably ad nauseum about how much we love Claude for certain things. I think their projects feature is really incredible. Really for any sort of, idea synthesis and text generation, it's great. Perplexity, I love, especially for, things like data enrichment and research. Ad creative has become a recent favorite for me for things like advertising and creating banners, because you could generate a lot of these images going to some place like Midjourney, but ad creative is a great example of a tool that does image generation, but it is very, very specifically focused on a marketer's workflow. Those are a few favorites. I could probably keep going on and on, but I'll keep it at that.
Yeah,
Anthony, any favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the general sense, I think Claude serves a lot of great. It solves a lot of problems, and I think Shannon mentioned they've been productizing Claude in a better and better way. I think that the projects feature's really great. I think it's smart. It just works. I like the artifacts feature, which means like you can ask it to code for you and or code with you, you know what I mean? And it does a really good job. But the thing that's great about that is like your idea can also be viewed in like a browser. So you can say, write me, a tic-tac-toe game, and you not only do you see the code, but you can also preview it. So I think that that's really helpful. And that's kind of pointing in lots of directions where I think a lot of this software is going to go. There's a new piece of software that I'm really anxious to try that I'm on early access for. It's called Auto. And Auto's kind of like rethinking like tabular data in a way where you think of a spreadsheet, and from what I get on it, it's like each cell, say L55, could have its own sort of prompt. It's really sort of the reason why I'm thinking that I will like Auto is that it looks like it's building um in the direction of like where spreadsheets have left off. You know what I mean? And I think that's very profound. I'm also sort of on the look at a lot of the creative tools. I think creativity is going to be greatly enhanced and augmented by. So I look at like Udio, of course, for audio production. We're looking at Bland AI for outbound calling and voice conversation. We look at like image upscalers like Magica, and of course we think Leonardo is great. So there's just like there's a lot of these products that are really great, and some of them, like the upscaler project that I had mentioned, is interesting because it's really it will take an image, but it's like it's got baked into it, like it's magnific, right? Is that how I pronounce that, Shane?
Yeah.
It's not Dolly, but probably Stable Diffusion or Leonardo or Image Journey, and you bring it in here and you can further enhance it. So there's becoming like tools that you use for different reasons in your pipeline. They're all AI driven, and I think that there's going to be the exciting thing here, Francesca, is like there's so many tools, and
yes, that's what I was going to say. That I asked for one, and I think I couldn't stop you from saying at least 3 each, even if I tried.
I feel like we should give some of the smaller ones a shout out, because a lot of people know Perplexity and Claude, and just keeping with our mission, like there are just so many great tools. I think GPT for Sheets is an incredible piece of software. You can use ChatGPT directly in a spreadsheet. Really great team. We use it all the time. Ellipsis is a great tool for design. Big View, if you make any sort of social media videos, teleprompters, if you want help generating scripts, Big View is awesome. There's a ton. Go to the website, look at the
Yeah.
leaderboards, and there are quite a few tools that we could probably spend a lot of time talking about.
I will add for my answer a couple of two different ways of approaching it. One is it is very fascinating to me to see how existing tools, existing companies are folding AI into their technologies. And so as I mentioned earlier, email marketing was a space I was really looking into, and how HubSpot and MailChimp, which were tools I've been using since 2016, whenever I was doing mailing lists, have both folded in some AI capacity into their workflows. So I would advise you, if you have a tool that your employer is already paying for that you're using, look to see what kinds of AI features that they're adding, because they're definitely adding those features. GitHub added Copilot, and it has been a success. I haven't used it yet, but I've read all about it. Canva. So Anthony mentioned Leonardo. Canva acquired Leonardo.
That's so amazing.
Which is incredible. Canva is probably my favorite sort of tool to do any visual design, and that it had acquired Leonardo for sort of the generative AI abilities. I think it's also really interesting that Uber One members now have a year of Perplexity for free built into the membership. So look at what you already have as well, and how you can leverage the AI offerings there, particularly now that Canva has acquired Leonardo.
I mean, one of
question.
One of the things I love most about our podcast is we use Riverside for the podcast, and we tried a ton of other tools, and Riverside has become by far our favorite so far.
Yes, and it does exactly what you want it, at least what I wanted to do, which is make it really easy for you to just sit down and talk like we're doing right now.
Exactly. It's like you don't like, and I mean, it's only getting better. They just made a new feature. I mean, we try and use everything. We are starting to use their clips. So they have a clip ad, they make social media clips. So it's an exciting time right now if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a business owner to see the software that can really sort of help your teams move faster. So, we're here. There's one thing that we really didn't touch on that much, but there's and we're pretty stealth about this, but it's worth sort of, and as we do this, we end up talking to a lot of company owners and businesses because they'll say, hey, we're reading your website, or we got a membership or whatever thing, and they'll say, hey, but we need some private, and we keep that sort of in a stealth sort of sense, because it's the best way to learn is sometimes when you're not learning where someone wants to make you the marketing. You know what I mean? And so we also learn a lot when we're actually talking with these company owners and seeing how they are thinking about it. So there's a lot of stuff that you alluded to. Maybe we're doing too much. I mean, we probably are, and but we're also in this very critical phase of learning what needs to be done, why, and for whom. And so, stay tuned. We have a lot of cool stuff. I know you're trying to wrap this up for us there.
Yes, I had two more rapid questions, but we'll see how rapid we can get through them. So my penultimate rapid question: what is one question on your mind that you still don't have an answer to about the AI space? That you would like an answer to, hopefully down the line, or you'd like to see some kind of answer to this question, but a question that is on your mind. And I can go first to give you guys some time to think. One question that is on my mind is really in part of frustration that I have, that I've talked about in maybe the last 2 episodes now, but there was still something about the workflow that we all operate in, which I call the copy paste workflow, that I think is so jarring to my experience with something like, let's say, Claude. And if I'm using Claude to draft an email template that I want to, use and really for something quite routine, it's not like I'm uploading anything as context. I'm really just prompting it to draft me an email. There are still so many like intermediary steps I have to take, which like opening a new tab, maybe a login, typing the prompt, getting the prompt, copying it, pasting it back into my sort of email window, sending it, if I get a reply, I copy and paste that reply into my prompt. So my question, which is really just masking a frustration, how are we going to, solve this kind of fragmented copy paste workflow? And, copy paste might not, everything just still feels fragmented. And maybe that is why there are 50,000 tools. And at what point are we going to see some really good, seamless communication between these tools, the way that, iOS apps have become pretty seamless now, where they weren't maybe when the first few iterations of iPhone came out, but now it's assumed that every like service provider has a mobile app. And like, when are we going to get to that point with
here's how I'd say,
the frustration?
let's hope that it's better than the mobile app frustration, right? Because like, like the Delta app and the United app, and they all kind of they're like they phone it in. It's not really the best app. So I mean, I think in Asia they have like super apps where like the super app actually has a lot of plugins.
I have my family lives in the Philippines. I'm from the Philippines, and so I use one of the super apps that's like food delivery and ride sharing and parcel delivery and payments, like all in one app. And I don't know that I want that necessarily here, but I definitely get the frustration of having to have two windows open side by side, copying and pasting to get really what isn't even the most, intellectually intensive task of my day. So that's my question.
My answer to that, at least the thing though, what came to mind immediately when you were asking that question was really two potential ways we get there, and the future is probably some combination of both. But one is we do have the super app, right? I think the Googles and the Microsofts of the world are trying to do that.
Yes.
Right? They want you to come to them for everything, right? It's like they have all your data. They know you're locked into their ecosystems already through, Gmail or Zoom or whatever, your calendar, and they will do their best to try to integrate all those products into one seamless experience. I think even this is like a really simple example, but I love the fact that I can, to go back to the phone, I love the fact that I can copy something on my phone and then paste it on my, my MacBook, like when I'm working seamlessly. But we want to get rid of the copy paste thing, right? So there's that world, but I think also you're really talking about the promise that agents hold for us, where they can go out and do, connect a lot of these disparate apps for us, and work somewhat autonomously, where you're not the one having to constantly context switch or switch between tabs. And that's actually one of the reasons why one of my favorite tools, which we didn't mention, is make.com, because you can make a lot of those connections between many different applications and websites, integrate, certain AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude into that workflow, and have essentially now all of these different apps communicating with each other in an automated workflow.
Anthony or Shane, do you have a question on your mind right now?
I think the question I have, like, so I'm like with AI, I'm less sort of into the questions of AGI, and frankly, I haven't really. I'm still trapped in the practical AI world, but I do think that I think there's my question is, when do we have like more like a clairvoyance of that the AIs that I've sufficiently connected enough AI tools to my work stream that instead of me copying and paste, it's like it's saying, like it's doing a stand up with you. It said, "Hey, Francesca,
Mhm.
I've wrote 9 emails that you needed to write during your drafts. I changed your calendar because you're overloaded. You're not going to be able to finish your day. I added 2 workouts for you. I've already booked your lunches, and I wrote these things for you in code that I just want you to actually take a look at these PRs, see if they're good." And it's like, what? When is that going to come? Because it's somewhat able to be there. Like, so I didn't copy and paste. It became clairvoyant. Like, it was just like, it read your schedule. It knew your life. It's optimizing you. It's planning that. Like, when does that get here? Because it's it's like it's not that far away. Like, that all could be now, frankly. Um, so hopefully that's my question. Is like, when do we get there? You know what I mean? I think people
Shane,
will
did
be
you
happy.
have one?
I like that one. I mean, just there's so, we've talked about this on prior episodes. Having an assistant essentially for your life to take care of all the administrative stuff that is important, but it's also just a pain to deal with. Especially around things like schedule, like Anthony mentioned, and optimizing your time. I mean, that's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I feel like, the rise of all these automation tools, I think, is less likely to take jobs and more likely to make people so productive that they, as a reward, get asked to do more work.
We lost them.
Yeah, I get ads on various browsers and social media for so many AI tools now that are trying to just schedule things, and I feel like it's because it knows that I am always I really live by my calendar and I'm always overwhelmed with it. So
Yeah.
I think the scheduling and sort of trying to offload some of that mental work of just organizing your life before you can even do something is going to be interesting to see how much the AI can get that right. And if people are actually unwilling, I think I'm almost unwilling to offload that in a way because I love to be so in control of my calendar.
Yeah.
But
Now that I would revise my answer, I think what I'm like, I'm really big into like fitness wearables, and I think that's also a really interesting area. Where we'll
totally
definitely see a lot of
yes.
innovation.
Yeah, I
I've been
agree.
wearing a Whoop for the past, I don't know, 4 years, and they several months back integrated GPT-4 into that, where you can actually have conversations with ChatGPT based on your data. That's only the beginning. Being
Yeah.
able to really understand your body at the
That I
molecular
agree with
level,
it.
even, I think will be. I just think it will be so cool. Especially when you extend it into things like nutrition and personalized healthcare or medicine,
Totally
or
agree. Yeah.
even cosmetics. If you're like my wife's
Yeah.
company's precision skincare, it's just the beginning, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, fashion, I mean, to get to the point where you can have things fully customizable to your not only taste, but if there's some integration with your calendar, it's like, hey, you've got a birthday party coming up, you've got a wedding coming up, order this outfit. But the last question I had, which was, we've spent over an hour talking about AI. My final question before you can both tell us where to find what's next for Koeare, outside of all of the thinking you do with regards to the AI space, what is something that is exciting to you right now outside of AI? It could be anything. And I know that Anthony floated some ideas earlier, but what is something that when you're not thinking of AI is exciting for you to think about right now?
Yeah, so like we both like sports, so it's like I've become addicted to playing pickleball. So like I'm like when I'm not like I love the idea of being outside with random strangers all playing the game extraordinarily vigorously and with high competition and sort of win loss sort of kicked up in. So I'm not thinking about work or anything like that. I'm actually wanting to play pickleball. But I'm also a dad, so I have two teenage daughters. So I spend a lot of time just like also being like an Uber. So there's plenty of time for me to be so disconnected from the wonderful world of technology and be plugged into some really analog sort of like manual labor and sports. And I love it. So it's like I think that the more AI in my life means that I'll also get equally more time to go play. So that's the way I look at it.
How about you, Shane?
I mean, a lot of things excite me. Hockey season's not going on. I'm a big ice hockey fan. But one of my best friends is getting married in October, and it's happening in
exciting.
Italy. And that's maybe the thing I'm looking forward to the most in the next, few months here. But like I said, there's so much that, excites
That's
me.
awesome.
Especially when it has to do with just like getting outside and being with people
Right.
that you love. I've got some weekend trips coming up, some festivals coming up. Anything that doesn't involve being behind a computer, period.
Yeah.
What about you,
I
Francesca?
would say for me, right now, what I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I know that it is because the Olympics are on, and like Anthony said, I am an avid sports fan, and in particular an avid sports watcher. I still have a cable box at home specifically so that I can watch live sports easily, including the Olympics. And it feels like as one sport ends, the next sport begins. And so, tennis just ended, and then women's golf is in the next couple of days, and then there's also men's basketball. I just follow all sports, but in addition to that, I play tennis myself and have started to, for the first time in my life, actually play competitive matches in an adult recreational league. And I'm so fascinated and frankly in awe of the mental fortitude that competitive athletes must have, and sort of the intense amounts of stress that they endure. If I feel the insane amount of stress watching the Olympics, and in my very, very low level comparatively league tennis match, I cannot even imagine being able to bear the mental load that they go through with all the people watching them, the world watching them, and the weight of a nation on their shoulders and all of that.
It's amazing.
That is currently what I'm in awe of.
I'm playing tournaments as well, and it's amazing how that is a different. It's a different It adds a dimension in your play that you don't have when you're playing non-tournament.
Right.
Like
yes.
it's just like you're like, oh my god, I'm on that court, everyone's watching me on this court. Like you're playing yourself, and I love that because I think that this goes for entrepreneurs. Like what's going on in your head is probably your word. It's against you when you're playing sports, and like Olympians literally have to work so hard through mindfulness to like to stay prepared and focused.
Absolutely, and the margins are so thin.
Hundreds of a
pressure,
second, 700 of a second.
Yeah, like I was reading up about the 100-meter sprints, and it's like 0.2 seconds of reaction time can be the difference between like first and last place, which is just those things don't even make sense to me anymore. Yeah. But I am glad we got to have this more personal, more open and relaxed podcast topic. Let us know in the comments if you want to hear more content like this, because we're happy to chat if that is what people want to hear. But maybe as we wrap up, Shane, if you could tell the people where to find us, since they've spent all this time listening to us.
Yeah, well, they can find us. The domain name and our handle on all social media channels is getcoai. That's getcoai.com. We say it every time. We'll say it again. We'd love to hear from you. The one thing I'd add is, there's a great talk by Andre Karpathy, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, a couple months back, and his observation was, there are so many teams out there building they're building the AI, but so many fewer who are building the support ecosystem around
Ramp.
AI. And that is exactly what we're building at CoAI. So if that sounds interesting to you, we'd definitely love to hear from you.
I love that. The ramp.
The ramp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we were inspired to hear that from him, and we're excited to talk with you guys. And Francesca, special shout out! Thanks for putting this one together. We appreciate it.
It was fun. I feel like I learned a lot about
you
and about the community.
I think it's great. Like we wouldn't normally just want to talk about ourselves. So I think that you've encouraged us. And I hope listeners are down for it, and we will definitely bring on newer voices as well. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Shane. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.